and welcome. It's been a while since I've done any drive lapses. I don't actually drive all that much. I mostly take public transit, and I haven't had a lot of time lately. But here we go. I'm finally making one, so I hope you enjoy it. I should say right up front, this is not one of those Russian drive lapses with the amazing accidents. It's also not one of those videos where we'll go around nitpicking all the little mistakes made by the other drivers, although we will see a few bad drivers along the way. This is not actually a planned drive lapse. I just started driving around totally randomly, so this is a totally random drive lapse. I just drove wherever I felt like, often taking the path of least resistance depending upon the traffic. So here's the path I took. This video almost didn't happen because I screwed up a few things. I set a whole bunch of the settings on the camera totally wrong. I didn't mount the camera very well, so it jiggles around a bit, and that caused some weird effects. You'll notice this weird thing where the video kind of shimmers and has that jello effect. It kind of looks like when they're trying to portray a flashback or something. This is the result of the bad camera settings and the poor camera mounting. It's not an earthquake or anything. Let's just pretend that it's because you're viewing a moment in the past through a time machine. So this window into the past through the time machine looks a little blurry and shimmers a little. I was going to throw away this footage, but then I watched it later and thought, maybe I could make something out of this because it is kind of a somewhat interesting drive. So I took it as a challenge. Because of all this, I'm calling this video the Random Mediocre Drive Lapse. We'll be taking a number of side trips along the way, tangents I call them, so I'll call it a random mediocre drive lapse with tangents. And because I'll be popping in and out every now and then with some narration and babbling through most of it, let's make it narrated random mediocre drive lapse with tangents. The YouTube experts will be aghast at this title because, you're supposed to make the video sound really fantastic so people will watch it. They'd all say I should call it my totally awesome and amazing drive lapse that you must see to believe in order to get people to click on it. But since this is a hobby for me, not a business, I don't need to do stuff like that. I can do whatever I want. Starting out on 9th Street in the South of Market neighborhood, heading north. Coming up on the right, we have a typical SRO hotel. SRO stands for single room occupancy, in other words, a residential hotel where people pay by the day, week, or month for a single room, often with a shared bathroom at the end of the hall. You see most of these types of hotels in the Tenderloin, but they are in other places too, such as here in SoMa. I believe that the rent at this one is around $200 per week for one person in a single room. And there's a marijuana dispensary on the ground floor, so that's convenient. It's interesting how this old building contrasts with the newly built expensive high-rise condos directly behind it. The building up ahead and slightly to the left is the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, named after famed concert promoter Bill Graham, of course. It holds about 7,000 people and was built in 1915 as part of the Panama Pacific International Exposition. They have a lot of concerts here. They also have trouble with homeless people camping out around it because of the location. A while back they came up with kind of a novel solution to that. They started playing really obnoxious sounds and loud music through outdoor loudspeakers to discourage homeless people from hanging out there. Kind of an interesting solution to that problem. You can't see it from here, but City Hall is off to the left and the main public library is off to the right. Up ahead to the left is a large 25-story building, the Phillip Burton Federal Building and United States Courthouse. It has IRS, FBI, and U.S. Marshals offices, the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, and a lot of other federal offices. As you might imagine, it has some security. I went by to photograph it on a Sunday when no one was around. I was a little worried that I might get some flack from security for photographing, but as it turns out I didn't have any issues with security. Instead, I had this guy here who seemed a little out of it, shall we say, and was constantly in my shots of the security entrance. A few feet away across the street is Emperor Norton's Booze Land. I don't actually know anything about this place, I just like the name. It has a great name. Actually, it's a new place that recently reopened and I've heard some good things, but I just like the name, Emperor Norton's Booze Land. By the way, we're now in the Tenderloin neighborhood, which has a somewhat bad reputation. Right here, we're specifically in a sub-neighborhood called Little Saigon. And there's a place off to the right by the UPS truck that is my favorite place to buy Vietnamese sandwiches. It's your classic hole in the wall with good food. Most people get takeout because the place is tiny and only has one table, and it usually has a line of people going out the door. The ladies that work in there, and they're all ladies for some reason, are really fast at making the sandwiches though, so the line moves pretty fast. This nondescript windowless building on the right is a PG&E building. I think there's just equipment inside there. Along the side, there's a place where people are known to lay out stuff on the sidewalk for sale, sort of an impromptu flea market. I'm told that the local homeless people call this the Wall. You find places like this around the Tenderloin where people try to sell stuff that they've found or scavenged or gotten somehow. I don't know where they get it. Sometimes I see what looks like someone's last worldly possessions out for sale to get whatever money they can. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it looks like sometimes. You gotta watch yourself at this corner because they've got one of those red light cameras. I see it flashing from time to time as I walk by, so it does seem to be operational. Off to the right is one of the major adult theaters. We won't be going in there today, hope you don't mind. Maybe we'll visit there some other time. This corner here is one of those places where every once in a while I'll be walking by and there'll be a woman pacing on the corner, cell phone out, and she's just a little too unexpectedly friendly. Or sometimes they'll just give you that certain look and you know what's going on. Sometimes certain ones may look like women, but if you look a little closer you'll see that's not actually the case. They aren't actually women. But hey, you know, to each their own. Live and let live. That's what I say. After we turn left or west onto California Street, there's a place here on the right called Soda Popinski's. Another case of a place I don't actually know a lot about, but I just like the name, Soda Popinski. It's a great name. Here we encounter some cable cars. It's required by law that all videos of San Francisco have a cable car in them somewhere, so we've now satisfied that requirement 3 times over. By the way, that's a real cable car bell, but in interest of full disclosure, I actually recorded it somewhere else and substituted it in here for atmosphere. We're now turning on to Van Ness Avenue. This is Highway 101 North. Normally 101 is a freeway in most of California, but as it goes through San Francisco, about 4 miles of it is just city streets. There were plans at one time to have a whole network of freeways crisscrossing San Francisco. Fortunately, due to something called the Freeway Revolt in the late 1950s and early 1960s, which involved neighborhood associations, the general public, and the San Francisco supervisors, all rising up against the Department of Highways and state government, and therefore most of those proposed freeways were never built, and most of the few that were built have since been torn down. All these double parkers on the right are because of a popular steakhouse over there. We're driving by at dinner time, so the valets are very busy. Our light has already turned green for us, but this impatient guy who was held up by the two turning buses just blatantly runs his red light. Not really a very smart thing to do with a street as busy as Van Ness. Here's another view of this incident from another camera that was on the car. It has a wider angle of view. You can see just how blatant this was. Van Ness Avenue was named after James Van Ness, who was San Francisco's 7th mayor from 1855 to 1856. He left office under the terms of the Consolidation Act, which was passed by the state legislature. This provided for the merger of city and county governments into one unit, and ever since then the city and county of San Francisco have been a single entity. There are 27 other places in the U.S. where that same thing is true. Here, Highway 101 leaves Van Ness and turns left onto Lombard Street. Most people are going to the left to follow 101 over to the Golden Gate Bridge, about 3 miles away, but we're going to continue down Van Ness Avenue. We're going to turn right onto Bay Street. Van Ness continues for a couple more blocks ahead and then dead ends at the Bay at Aquatic Park. Aquatic Park is one of the places you go to watch the July 4th fireworks. Fireworks in San Francisco are usually shot off over the bay for safety reasons, obviously, and they're very often obscured by fog, so they deliberately set them to explode lower than they would in most places. Up ahead, you can actually see a little bit of the new span of the Bay Bridge and Treasure Island out in the bay. We're now turning onto Hyde Street, which is the route of the Powell Hyde cable car. You may notice the car shimmy back and forth a little here. The tires are actually slipping on the metal rails. This hill is steep, but it's nothing for San Francisco. It doesn't even make it into the top 10 list of steepest streets in San Francisco. This is about a 19% grade. There are disputes as to which are the steepest street, but generally they're in the range of 35 to 40% grade, so much steeper than this one. Here we're at the intersection with Lombard Street, and off to the left is the so-called world's crookedest street, Lombard Street. But we're not going there today, we're going to drive on by. Hyde Street is named after George Hyde, who was alcalde of San Francisco in 1847. An alcalde is the traditional Spanish municipal magistrate. This was before San Francisco was part of the United States. At this point, we're currently going over top of the Broadway Street Tunnel. There's a video elsewhere on my channel that includes that tunnel, so I suggest that you check that out sometime. Here you can see the GPS thinks I'm over on top of the roofs of the houses. The GPS sometimes gets off a little within the city. I think both the tall buildings and the hills kind of throw it off. It'll get much worse when we're among the tall buildings of downtown later on in this video. Off to the left is the Hideout Bar, another name that I like. Now back on California Street, we're heading up to the top of Nob Hill. Here we have yet another cable car, plus one of the many tour buses. Be sure to wave to the tourists. Next, we're going to turn down Mason Street, yet another steep hill. It can be kind of interesting on these steep hills, depending on what type of car you have and how long the front is. Sometimes you can't really see what's ahead of you, and you just kind of have to take it on faith, go slow, hope there's nothing in front of you. Gonna have a little fun here and go down the hill really fast. Okay, now that we've had our fun, let's back up and go down at a more reasonable speed. Mason Street is named after Colonel Richard B. Mason, who was military governor of California at the time that gold was discovered. He organized a workable government in California during the 2 critical years, during the wild times of the gold rush when not much help was coming from the federal government in Washington. We're skirting the edge of the Union Square area off to the left, a prime tourist area, but only a couple of blocks off to the right is the Tenderloin neighborhood, so this is an area where 2 very different neighborhoods meet, and you can see quite a difference if you just walk a couple of blocks in each direction. We're now turning on to Market Street, a major thoroughfare that cuts through the middle of San Francisco. This part, however, is known as Mid-Market and is a section that has been very run down for quite some time. They keep trying to revitalize it, only partially successfully so far. Say hello to the people on the bus there. That's the 21 Hayes that goes out to the edge of Golden Gate Park. I was on a bus the other day and I noticed that someone left me some chicken fried rice. And you know, sometimes those bus rides can get just a little boring. Off to the right is the old Hibernia Bank building. This was an important building that was completed in 1892, famous for its grand architecture and housing one of the city's first banks, and it survived the 1906 earthquake. After the bank left, the building was used for a number of purposes, including even a police station, but it's been vacant and neglected for over 20 years and has become a haven for drug dealing and graffiti and things like that. But recently it looks like it's going to finally be developed, possibly into a nightclub of some sort. The GPS shows us wandering over toward UN Plaza. We aren't really, but since the GPS wants us to go there, let's go take a look. UN Plaza is one of the places where the Tenderloin neighborhood meets the rundown mid-market area that I mentioned earlier, so it has kind of a checkered reputation. A lot of homeless people hang out here and camp here, and sometimes there have been problems with them using the fountain as a shower or a toilet. This is also one of those places with impromptu flea markets that I mentioned earlier. I've heard it said that if you have something stolen, this is one of the places where you should come to find it for sale. It was originally designed as a monument for the United Nations because the original UN Charter was signed at the War Memorial Opera House, which is about 2 blocks west of here. The tall monuments have the names of the member nations engraved on them. Despite its problem with the homeless, various festivals and parades do take place here. And there's a farmer's market every Wednesday and Sunday, so it's not all terrible. Well, let's get back on track, regardless of what the GPS says. We're re-entering the Tenderloin neighborhood now. And there goes a cop car, not something unusual to see. Maybe we can cut over that way and see if there's anything exciting going on that I can put into the video, following at a safe distance, of course. So safe that he's long gone, oh well. Okay, off to the right there, you can see a Tenderloin local hanging out, pacing the corner, dressed a certain way. I've seen her hanging out at this corner numerous times in the past. You can draw your own conclusions as to what might or might not be going on there. We're currently on Ellis Street, which is named after Alfred J. Ellis, who was a member of the first California Constitutional Convention in 1849, which was part of the process of California becoming the 31st state. He was a member of the Whig Party, which disintegrated in the 1850s and is no longer around. There were actually 4 U.S. presidents that were members of the Whig Party, though. I kind of wonder what Alfred J. Ellis would think of this street today. Now turning on to Polk Street. And we have chanced upon that cop that we saw go by. But before we check that out, take note of this building straight ahead. It's left over from the days when Van Ness Avenue, which is 1 block to the left of us, used to be Auto Row. It was where all the car dealers were. And this was a Pierce Arrow building, as you can see. It's now a homeless shelter. Pierce Arrow was an auto manufacturer from 1901 to 1938, most well known for expensive luxury cars. There are still some auto dealers left on Van Ness, but not quite as much as there used to be. Looks like they have indeed detained someone there. Much of Polk Street includes an area known as Polk Gulch. It has a lot of bars, restaurants, and nightlife. It tends to get rowdy around here on holidays, such as St. Patrick's Day, and when there are significant sporting events. True to form, the Polk Gulch area is often the final destination for a large portion of the SantaCon event that takes place each December. Polk Street was named for James K. Polk, the 11th President of the United States. He was a Democrat and defeated the Whig Party candidate. Polk Gulch goes on further, but I randomly decided to turn on to Clay Street at this point. Clay Street was named after Henry Clay, a Whig senator from Kentucky, who also served as Secretary of State. So here we have another street named after a politician from the Whig Party. Maybe I'll have to rename this video to the Whig Party Drivelapse. Nice views of the Transamerica Pyramid there as we head towards Chinatown. We're now in Chinatown, about to cross Stockton Street. Stockton Street is more of an everyday working street, whereas the parallel Grant Avenue, which we're going to come to soon, is the more touristy street. Now turning on to Grant Avenue, one of the oldest streets in Chinatown. It was originally called DuPont Avenue. When San Francisco was rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake, it was renamed to Grant Avenue after President Ulysses S. Grant. However, in Chinese, Grant Avenue is still written and said as DuPont Avenue. Well, it's a good thing I'm not hungry, otherwise we might have to pause this drive lapse while I go in and have some frog in hot and numbing spicy pot, because everybody likes food that's numbing. I also like to eat live fish every once in a while. It's only $28.95, but that numbing spicy pot is hard to beat. Now turning onto Broadway, we'll be leaving Chinatown and entering the North Beach neighborhood, also sometimes known as Little Italy. This portion of Broadway is famous as a small so-called red light district with nightclubs and strip clubs. North Beach got its name because a long time ago it used to actually be a beach on the northern end of the city. However, as the bay's been filled in over the years, the city's borders have been extended, so it's not a beach anymore, but the name has stuck. San Francisco has been the scene for many movies, of course, and a number of San Francisco locations are famous because of it. In this building off to the left used to be Enrico's Italian Restaurant. It's no longer there, having recently closed, although the sign is still there. This has appeared in a number of movies, including Bullitt and the Dirty Harry movies. I specifically remember a scene in the Dirty Harry movies where Dirty Harry meets one of his informants in this restaurant, and they mention it by name, Enrico's. Okay, and here we have a really bad bus driver turning right in front of me against a red light. You know, view-blocking gigantic buses are the natural enemy of anyone making a drive-lapse video, but at least this one, by being such a rude driver, gave me something to talk about, so what the heck. And then, of course, after turning right in front of me, he's going to turn left, of course, what else? You know, maybe I should turn this into one of those videos where we go around and document all the bad drivers. Nah. As we turn here on Battery Street, we're entering the financial district. It has the city's largest concentration of corporate headquarters, law firms, insurance companies, real estate firms, banks, and other financial institutions. Battery Street got its name because a long time ago the federal government had a military battery here. Of course, it's long gone now. On the right is the U.S. Customs House, completed in 1911. It's a 6-story building, and not unusual for early buildings in San Francisco. Its foundation rests on timbers from the hull of a steamship that was abandoned during the gold rush days. As we go around the corner onto Washington Street, we can see an obviously newer addition to the U.S. Customs House. We're now driving right by one of San Francisco's famous landmarks. As you may have noticed, the GPS lags behind by a few seconds. When the drive lapse continues, you'll see that it actually thinks we're way up at the top there, going over the top of the pyramid. The Transamerica Corporation is no longer here, but they still use this as their logo. This building faced significant opposition when it was first proposed, but over time has come to be appreciated as a favorite icon of San Francisco. Has a beacon at the top that can shine in different colors and is used for various significant events such as holidays and sports victories. Washington Street, as you might guess, was named after President George Washington. Heading back across Chinatown, obviously. Washington Street normally goes through here, however it's currently closed due to the construction of the new Central Subway, the T line. This spot will be the Chinatown stop. Construction on this subway started in 2010 and it's supposed to be finished in 2019. It will be 1.7 miles in length, the majority underground. The cost is projected to be over $1.5 billion. As you can imagine, some people are a bit critical of that cost. We're now on Stockton Street, named after Commodore Robert F. Stockton, who was military governor of California for the first 6 months that California was part of the United States after the Mexican-American War in 1848. This is the Stockton Street Tunnel, which was completed in 1914. It's kind of interesting that the tunnel for the new Central Subway that we just talked about is directly underneath this tunnel. And this is the view from the top of the Stockton Street Tunnel, looking back over Stockton Street, the route that we just came up. Coming out the other end of the tunnel, we're square in the middle of the Union Square shopping area, no pun intended, a prime tourist area. Turning right onto Sutter Street, named after John Sutter. He arrived in 1839 and was quite an enterprising businessman with large land holdings, farms, and other businesses. And he was the Sutter who owned Sutter's Mill, which is where gold was first discovered in 1848 and started the gold rush. He tried to keep the discovery a secret, but failed. The news leaked out, and sadly his land was overrun with squatters, and he eventually lost his entire empire. Now turning onto Powell Street, headed towards Union Square there off to the left. At this point, as happens in San Francisco fairly frequently, we've encountered some sort of protest march. I don't know what they're protesting, but they're blocking traffic. So I turned left onto Polk Street with Union Square off to the right. Polk Street is named after Gabriel Post, a merchant and state senator in the mid-1800s. I'm turning right again onto Grant Avenue to see if I can loop back around to Union Square. This guy doing the illegal U-turn here is a cop in an unmarked car. I assume that has something to do with the protest march we just saw. And there goes a guitar player on the way to somewhere or other. This constriction has been here for quite some time. It's part of the construction for the new Central Subway. It's kind of annoying. We're now on Geary Street, a major street, and the construction has been creating this bottleneck here for quite some time. One of the stops for the new subway will be here at Union Square. Off to the left is Macy's, and off to the right is Union Square. Here's a view of Union Square from Macy's. Union Square got its name because it was used for rallies for the Union Army during the Civil War. The tall monument in the center commemorates Admiral George Dewey's victory at the Battle of Manila Bay during the Spanish-American War. It also commemorates U.S. President William McKinley. The underground parking garage underneath was built in 1941 and is supposedly the world's first underground parking structure, or so they claim. There are many events that take place in Union Square, such as concerts and art shows. There's the Christmas tree lighting that takes place each year. And in some years, SantaCon has shown up here too. Geary Street is named after John White Geary, who was the first postmaster of San Francisco and also the first mayor of San Francisco. He was only in San Francisco for 3 years, but when he left, he gave the city the land for Union Square. We're heading back through the Tenderloin here, continuing on up Geary Street. These red lanes to the right are supposed to be for buses and taxis only, but I think this is one of the most disregarded traffic laws ever. Up here I made a rather embarrassing mistake. I was trying to get through this intersection, get around this ambulance. The light was green, I thought I had enough time. Unfortunately, the light changed just as I went through, and as luck would have it, just as I started to go through, all the traffic in front of me stopped, leaving me stuck here in the crosswalk. I don't like it when people do that, and here I am doing it myself. Oh well, sorry everyone. I guess I'll have to put myself in that bad drivers compilation, won't I? We're about to cross Van Ness Avenue again, and when we do, we'll be exiting the Tenderloin and entering the Cathedral Hill area. Off to the right is a construction site of a new hospital. There used to be a large hotel there that occupied the entire block, and I actually have another channel called the Hotel Demolition Channel, where I've been posting time lapses and close-ups of the demolition, and I invite you to check out that channel if you like. Here are a few scenes from that channel, the Hotel Demolition Channel. Hope you don't mind a shameless plug for my other channel. Cathedral Hill gets its name because of a number of churches that were built on this hill. People have a propensity to build churches on hills. Over time, those churches have become surrounded by other high-rise buildings, in this case residential buildings. As we go over the top of Cathedral Hill, you can see the fog off to the west waiting to come in. You can barely see it from the car, but off to the left is the Chinese consulate. They have a lot of security because there are frequent protests here, for example, about Tibet. Here's a protest a while ago that was about Vietnam marching over Cathedral Hill on their way to the Chinese consulate. You'll notice that this was back when the hotel was still there. Heading to the right is Japantown. The tall monument you see there is the Peace Pagoda. It's a 5-tiered concrete stupa designed by Japanese architect Yoshiro Taniguchi and presented to San Francisco by the people of Osaka, Japan around 1968. A stupa is a structure that usually contains Buddhist relics. They have a lot of events in this area, such as the recent J-pop festival, and you can find a video about that festival elsewhere on my channel. We won't be stopping at Japantown today. We're going to turn off of Geary Street. Geary Street heads way out almost to the western edge of San Francisco, almost to the Pacific Ocean. We're now turning on to Webster Street, which was named after Daniel Webster. And you guessed it, he was yet another Whig politician, a senator from Massachusetts. Even though we're about to turn on to the fancy-sounding Golden Gate Avenue, this is not a particularly exciting or touristy neighborhood. San Francisco has its everyday mundane parts too. No offense to the neighborhood. The tall building ahead is the new headquarters of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, in charge of providing water, power, and sewer service to San Francisco, one of the greenest buildings you'll find. It includes an integrated solar array and wind turbine installation that generates about 7% of the building's electricity needs. It has on-site treatment and reclamation of its own wastewater, both gray and black, through a living machine system. It has a rainwater harvesting system, and the building was built with environmentally friendly and recycled materials. To promote alternative transportation, this 13-story building, which is home to 900 employees, has only 4 parking spaces, and I wonder who gets those 4 spaces. Now we have our final questionable driving of this drive lapse. This guy from the right pulls out in front after the light has changed in a busy street blocking traffic and stops like a deer caught in the headlights. And then instead of going forward, he instead backs up slowly, continually blocking traffic. Now let's see another view of this incident from the secondary camera. Secondary camera doesn't work very well in low light, which is why it's the secondary camera. I cleaned it up as best I could, but it's still not the best quality, but you can see what's going on. So the light in my direction has already changed, and this guy comes along and decides to make a right turn on red directly in front of traffic. But that's not the whole story. If you look closely, you'll see apparently at some point in the past, he has run over a construction cone and is dragging it along. And as he makes this turn, it comes loose and he starts running over it, which I guess maybe causes him to panic because he thought something's going wrong or he ran over something. I don't know. Of course, I didn't notice this when I was driving. I only noticed this after I went back and reviewed the video. So yes, I could understand panicking if you get something caught under your car, but this whole thing was precipitated by him running the red light in the first place. So anyway, there's another item for the Bad Driver compilation, which this drive lapse was not supposed to be, but it did happen to capture quite a few, myself included. Well, we're nearing the end of our random drive lapse. I thank you for sticking with me if you're still here. I know this is a rather long video. Doesn't really fit the mold of your typical short YouTube video designed for short attention spans, but oh well. You know, YouTube sometimes sends out these notification suggestions, tips. They sent me this one. In general, it seems like people are only watching part of your videos. For tips on keeping viewers engaged, check out the Creator Playbook. Well, gee, thanks YouTube for rubbing that in there and implying that my videos aren't exciting enough. I guess I'm just not keeping you guys sufficiently entertained. Sorry about that. Well, that ends this drive lapse. My narrated random mediocre drive lapse with tangents. My first drive lapse in quite some time. If you managed to stick it out all this time, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.